This is the I Read Comic Books podcast, and I am your host for this week's episode, Paul Lee, filling in for Mike Rapin, and I am here with two members of the Misfits, not the legendary punk band from Lodi, New Jersey. No, the Misfits from Gem and the Holograms, the 80s cartoon show. That's Kara Shimborski.
Hey.
And Nick White.
I have nothing to contribute on either of those topics.
That's unfortunate.
You're definitely a Stormer, and then I would say you're Jazz, Kara, if we're talking Misfits.
Aww.
So, but yeah, we're back here talking all about comics today. We have a very special episode that was commissioned by our good friend Cinco. They wanted us to talk all about music and comics. We're going to get deep into that, hence the music reference right at the top of the show. But before we get to all the musical mayhem we have planned for you, let's start with the two questions I am legally obligated to ask every time I host the show. How have you been? How have comic books been? Let's start with you, Nick.
Well...
Yeah, Nick, how are you?
Yeah,
Geez,
I mean,
not good.
the weather's been real interesting around here. I have to admit, I don't know if you had the what's that?
Do you start every "How are you" with a "This is the weather around me"?
No, I mean I do sort of keep that for this show. With everyone else, I just usually turn around and walk away. That seems like the most appropriate thing to do. That good, huh? Yeah, about that good. Michigan's been weird. Like, we had a terrible thunderstorm last night, like really bad. I don't know if you had that in GR as well, Paul, but
Yep.
Really bad thunderstorm, super windy. So, it's been a good time to sit down and read some books. And what better book to sit around and wallow in but Alien number 11.
Okay. They made 11 of those movies so far. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, if you count up like all of the Alien versus Predator movies, there's just enough of those.
You?
So
Sure.
Oh no, just burn those things. Just I mean, they've given Lance Hendrickson like some extra work, and so
Sure.
I appreciate that. But so this is by Philip Kennedy Johnson. Writing, Salvador LaRocca art, Guru EFX colors, Clayton Coles on letters, and for me, like, God, it brings up a really good question for me, which is, can you call a twist when the twist is the fact that the first twist happens a second time?
No. Two twists don't make a clever plot, I guess. Yeah.
If like
Two
at
zigs
that
don't
point,
make a zag.
is it merely a twist that has happened again, and that stops it from being a twist? I don't know. Some things to think about. Two twists make a right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. There we go.
It's like two twists is a circle. Or maybe it's a swirly cone. I guess it depends on the context. Is this ice cream or a circle?
Yeah, is this soft serve? Is this soft serve ice cream?
It sounds like no,
right.
Since you're still just laughing about how the twistiness made it not good. So I'm going to go with not soft serve. We are in a flat circle where Nick is disappointed.
I think this is like we've reached the alien point of diminishing returns where I'll even go. I'm okay with the twist happening a second time. I'm just shocked that they're even trying things, I guess would be a good way of putting it. Look, I'll grant you that LaRocca doesn't really have human beings in his wheelhouse as an artist, but issue 11 kind of calls into question whether or not he can even draw the same quasi-humanoid consistently.
Oh my.
There were multiple moments where I did a double take, convinced I was looking at a totally new character, which is always a weird thing in Alien because, like, the good thing about Alien math is that you never have to keep track of more people. You always have to keep track of less people. That's just
Right.
how Alien works.
Uh-huh.
It's a narrative element that really helps me juggle the characters.
Sure.
Knowing that they'll all die.
Yeah, exactly. It really helps me juggle all the characters. I just take the in those chapter books we had as kids where they're like, oh, dramatis personae at the beginning in the characters. Well, with an Alien book, you just get to cross off all the names as you go through the book. It's real handy.
I just feel like you're mentally just putting everybody in a red shirt as they walk past you in the frame.
Yeah. like his environments look fine, and there's a couple moments in this issue where it like sort of shuffles between different locales, and those look great, but like the Roca should play to his strengths, and by that I mean inanimate objects.
Nick.
Honestly, this is probably the strongest issue of this arc, which is going on for like 6 or 7 issues now. Next month will be the last one. And narratively, I thought it was fine. I just this book is just an issue of fit. Like I take no great pleasure in like ragging on the Roca. Obviously, he's
I don't know, Nick. It sounds like you do.
This book is like, remember in the Da Vinci Code where Paul Bettany is like self-flagellating, you know, with that whip, and he's like that albino guy, like
sure,
and like he's like this is my version of that, okay? Like every month, this is my penance, okay?
For what? Being an Alien fan?
For being an Alien fan, yeah.
This doesn't feel like a great way for them to expand popularity in the franchise if even the people who love it are like, this really blows. Like everything you've said about this book so far, Nick, has been like the verbal equivalent of a flamethrower. Like that's the intensity of the burns you've been dishing out so far. So like, how am
I mean, a
like,
flamethrower would
Alien
work narratively for the Alien franchise. So, you know, you just got to burn it all.
Like I have zero interest in looking at this now, even because I'm like, well, if I can't even tell which character is which, and there are multiple twists and they're not even good, like why bother? Why should we bother to be invested in Alien if they give us this, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting because it's one of those situations that it's just an issue of fit. I think we've all seen books where maybe we really like the artist, but we feel the script just isn't right there, or we think narratively the script is really great, but it belongs in the hands of someone else. And this is just one of those situations where you just kind of go, what if Riley Rossmo was drawing this? I know people would probably fucking lose their shit over that, but I think that would be cool. Like Riley Rossmo or Wes Craig or someone else.
I guess you're describing Rise of Skywalker at this point. Like,
yeah,
I could see that. You're like, oh, you're so close. There's such a good idea here, and the execution was terrible.
Wait, was that Rise of Skywalker? I thought Rise of Skywalker was this is a movie. I guess this is a movie.
Fine.
I guess
the prequels.
Yeah,
good. Yeah, good ideas, poor execution.
Yeah. So
all right.
Well, I'll check in next month on this. Okay. We'll see how the arc ends, and
sure,
maybe they'll bring in someone else. I don't know. I did also read Kaiju number 8. I did promise that I would get people up to speed on this manga that had been recommended to me. So,
is it about monsters?
It is. It is about monsters. Oh. It began in July of 2020. Apparently, as far as Shonen Jump Plus metrics go, it was the fastest manga to ever reach 30 million views, which it did in like 5 months.
Wow.
The second collection just came out at the beginning of April. The third is coming out at the beginning or somewhere in July. This book follows this protagonist named Kafka. He lives in Japan, which of course is plagued by kaiju attacks, or at least I think it is. It's really expensive to visit Japan, so I don't really know, but I've seen Pacific Rim, right?
I haven't been to Japan, but I've seen Pacific Rim.
Yeah, close enough, right? Same thing.
I had sushi one time at a gas station.
Yeah. Yeah. I had 7-Eleven sushi, and now I'm qualified to speak about an entire nation as a collective entity. Yeah, definitely. Broad generalizations abound. And so this character, he has dreams as a child of joining the Japanese Defense Force alongside his friend Mina, but now he's in his 30s, which as far as manga protagonists go, he's basically 1 foot in the grave.
Oh, God.
He fails the entrance exam previously and then ends up working for a cleanup crew named Monster Sweeper, you know, after the monsters destroy Angel Grove, right, and the Megazord kicks the monster to the ground and it blows up, right? Somebody has to clean that up. What would be fun is if the book was actually about this loser slacker guy who just gets drunk and then cleans up monsters in a hazmat suit. That would be a good book. That would be a great book. That would be a fun book. But instead, he has this new guy who joins his cleanup crew who's like, I'm learning about monsters and I'm just here for a few months and then I'm going to go take the entrance exam and join the military. And then the age range changes for the test and he's like, you should take the test again, Kafka. And so he does, because he wants to prove to his childhood friend, who of course is now the captain of this military thing, that he too can kill monsters. And anyway, whatever. The art's really good. He ends up swallowing this weird little monster. If this part seems weird and rushed and it doesn't make sense, maybe it will at some point. It doesn't right now. He swallows this monster and gains the ability to turn into a kaiju himself that looks like Tradmore's Ghost Rider. Okay?
Oh, okay. Huh.
What?
It doesn't make sense.
I don't know about this, Nick.
It looks interesting, but it is a shonen manga, and while it sort of steps away from some of the shonen tropes, like it's not trying to like be iconoclastic, right? Like it's not trying to basically reinvent the genre, right?
It is of the genre.
It is shonen adjacent. It makes a couple steps. So like I said, like the protagonist is in his 30s, so clearly most shonen protagonists are, 12-year-old boys that are trying to fight everything, right? That is the target audience. I have read the Wikipedia entry on shonen, everyone. So
I was gonna say, it's kind of nice that, like, I have been reading a lot of young adult stuff, so my worldview right now is like, once you're past the age of 17, it's all over. So it's nice that they take that trope and they're like, no, life continues after your 20s, we swear.
Right. Not everything that will ever happen to you that is important at all happens in high school, right? Because that's what shonen would have you believe, is that the high school classroom is the most dramatic, most exciting venue for anything. But yeah, those are some things I've read.
Yeah.
I'm sure Danny will love all of that. But I'm gonna keep reading it, but it's still very like, let's compare our power levels, and my suit, after 5 weeks of training, I am only able to utilize 1% of this suit's energy. Will I ever make it? I am only ranked 7th amongst the top 12. That puts me in the 3rd percentile in this category of close combat. I've never consumed a single piece of Yu-Gi-Oh, but this sounds like Yu-Gi-Oh to me.
Yeah.
Right, like at a certain point when your manga starts reading like an Excel spreadsheet, and I'm like, I just need to filter these results in order from largest to smallest because I'm not following this. Like, that's when I sort of wonder if I'm having fun. Am I having fun, or am I doing a worksheet? Like, am I having fun, or is this some 7th grade math story problem? Which one is this? I'm
going to say these are 2 ringing endorsements from you, Nick, for these 2 comics. So thank you. You've really done a good job convincing people to check them out. So.
I also want to point out to our listeners listening to the show at a later date, we're currently recording this live with our Discord chat. So the reason Nick keeps yelling about Danny is because Danny's one of our lovely listeners in the chat who is actively yelling at him about how wrong he is. So, come to our live shows and yell at Nick live.
Yeah. Anyway, what about you, Kara? What have you been reading?
Oh my God. I was also reading a young adult book. I finally read Squad by Maggie Tokuda-Hall and Lisa Sterle, and it's basically Mean Girls with werewolves. And I say that with the highest possible praise. Like it, oh my God, like reading it is like reading a modern Mean Girls. And whatever you think about that movie, the writing is pure fire. So
get in, like, losers, we're going to go howl at the moon.
Exactly. So like all the dialogue felt believable. I really like the art style. The artist actually did the Modern Witch Tarot deck, which had like a brief moment of being marketed to me on Instagram, Barnes and Noble, and Amazon. So I feel like this is exactly in my wheelhouse. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh yes, this aesthetic is pleasing. Thank you. So it's like, it's this group of 3 girls, and like the new girl shows up and she's new from out of town. She doesn't have any friends, and the cool girls take her into the group right away. Plot twist, they're werewolves. So it's like they're mean girls. You see their group dynamic where like not everything is like oh my god, we're best friends. Like it's clearly that there's some like power struggles, and so already you're like, okay, these friendships are not on firm ground. So, and I know that there are werewolves because that's part of the marketing. So let's see how this goes. So you kind of see the conflict of like the dynamic of being in a pack together. They have to eat every month on the full moon, and it has to be humans. So their shtick is going to parties and getting guys who do not respect boundaries of women to try to assault them, and then they eat him in retribution. So at first I was reading this, I was like, oh, this is so cathartic. What a great what a great like power fantasy of getting to just totally like tear the throat out of somebody who's making you feel uncomfortable. Not that I've ever felt that way, but then like reading further, they kind of get into the like, well, what happens if we start bending these rules? What happens if these power dynamics are not what we thought? What happens if we accidentally murder somebody and all of a sudden the FBI is investigating? So you kind of see how things...
that all the time.
Right? So I thought it was very well done, very well paced. I kind of want to just like, as soon as we're done recording, sit down and read it again. I hope they make it into a movie, but I know the movie would be worse than the comics. So I'm kind of like, but it's a good story. Like versions of this story have definitely been done like the horror genre before, but I just feel like this version is very fresh and very modern. And it kind of made me sort of sit with some of my feelings about how it feels to be a woman or a more vulnerable person in the world, and just feeling constantly like men are trying to bother you or assume that they have a right to your time, attention, or body just because of who you are. And so I was just sitting there like, yes, I absolutely would like to become a werewolf and be able to not do that. And then I was like, well, are the only options really being either predator or prey? Because that kind of sucks too. Like, do you really want to become also somebody who messes up somebody's day? Can't we just have like an absence of power dynamic? Like, does there have to be a power dynamic? And then I got mad thinking about the Fantastic Four.
Yeah, but there always has to be there always has to be a predator and prey, because otherwise, as we covered earlier, Lance Hendrickson needs work, and so he needs these movies. So
oh my god,
yeah, no matter who wins, we lose.
No, it's okay. I got mad thinking about the Fantastic Four because I was like in the middle of this book and like drifted off into a little like mental tangent about like what it's like to like exist as a woman. And I always was thinking, like, I've been consuming superhero media for a long time, and part of that is you think like, well, what superpower would I want, and what superpower might actually like help me throughout the day. And I always was more drawn to the like powers of invisibility or like force fields and protection stuff. And reading this book in particular made me kind of like confront that and be like, well, why do I want to be invisible? Why do I want to have like force fields? And it's all just like keep scumbags away from me or like make them not notice me. And then I got mad, like, why do I have to be invisible or have like a shield around me to keep people physically away from me when the problem is not me existing? The problem is other people not having boundaries and not understanding that other people don't exist to just be their objects. So then I got mad about the Fantastic Four because I was like, the Invisible Woman has all these powers I thought I wanted, but she is an invisible woman. And then there's like the Thing, who you cannot help but look at him. He takes up so much space. There's Mr. Fantastic, who expands, and there's Johnny Storm, who burns up all of the oxygen. I'm like, you could not create a more perfect metaphor for like the gender gender binary in America than the Fantastic Four. And then I got mad and tweeted about it. So that's kind of how I came into this show, is just being really mad about how reality is right now, all because of Squad.
Enough.
Read Squad, guys.
No,
so I guess one of those... thanks, Squad, or no thanks. I'm not sure.
It was great. It was great for me to be like, why do I have to be invisible? Why can't why can't other people change who they are? Non-comic book related, we're coming up on the most glorious week of the year. May the 4th be with you. The Star Wars holiday. It started out as a fan thing, and then when Disney bought Star Wars, they were like, oh my God, a merchandising opportunity. Put it on the calendar. So my whole Instagram feed right now, because Instagram is the mall at this point, is like, look at all these cute Star Wars things that are going to be released this week. And I'm like, guys, I don't have a job right now. Please don't do this to me. I have no willpower when it comes to buying Star Wars things. So like ColourPop is releasing a new Star Wars makeup collection, and all the packaging is like the original film artwork, and it looks so rad. And that eyeshadow formula is actually pretty good. So if you need some eyeshadow, you should get the Star Wars one that's coming out. This very fascinating and very like bougie pastel rich lady aesthetic company called Stony Clover Lane that does like mostly pastel, like customizable like bags and accessories. And everything's like probably way more money than it should be. They're doing a Star Wars line. They had like a few like Disney line. They had like a Disney princess line that sold out right away. Deep sigh. I know, I'm almost done. But they have a Star Wars one coming out this week, and I am dying. They have like all these cute little pastel patches with like Darth Vader's helmet on it, or like an X-Wing on it. You could get a dip dye like pastel tie-dye tote bag covered in Star Wars patches. You can get, they have like these Star Wars fonts, shiny letters. So you could like get a bag and like pay them too much money to embroider your name on it in the Star Wars patches. Oh my God. So I've basically been trying to figure out how not to spend like $1,000 this week that I don't have. Because I'm like, but I want all of these things. How dare you? For like 40 years, we've been saying girls like Star Wars too. And all of a sudden they paid attention. And now I don't have the money for it. So I'm so mad.
Their eyes turned into dollar signs. Cha-ching.
Exactly. Oh my God. So for once, I am the target Star Wars demographic, and it's amazing. But also, I may make some bad choices this week. So.
Kira's going to actually start, like, you know, shouting from the rooftops, like maybe Star Wars isn't for girls, just out of the pure fact that she doesn't want them advertising to her right now.
Yeah.
Nick, they have this really cute pink pattern. It's like pale pink, and then there's like a little print of all the little ships on it. Oh, it's so cute.
Oh my God.
I know. Other Star Wars news. Last week, I went to Disneyland.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a friend that I haven't seen since before the pandemic. It was a really lovely time. And we went to Oga's Cantina, which is the Star Wars bar within the Star Wars land. I was just in there with like the robot DJ playing the disco version of the Mos Eisley Cantina song, and just like crying into my fizzy drink. So I was like, I miss bars. I miss bars, you guys.
Sure.
Crying into your drink, just slightly sobbing as you say, now this is pod racing.
The guy next to me was dressed like Han Solo, but like off-brand Han Solo, because they have rules in the park about like how close to a character costume you can get. Mm-hmm. And like I started talking to him, and he was like there just like by himself, just enjoying the Star Wars vibes. And I'm like, this dude is living the life. He is living the dream. He's just like, I wanted to be in a Star Wars today, and here I am. And it was just... Man, I'm so ready for us to be out of this pandemic, guys. We all need to be the Star Wars guy in the Star Wars bar living our best Star Wars lives.
We all need to be off-brand Han Solo.
Yes!
Yeah, so we don't have to travel to another galaxy to enjoy a beverage in public places. So, right.
I know, right? Oh my God. Anyway, so that's me. Star Wars all the time. How about you, Paul?
Well, yeah, obviously the holidays coming up. I would say I'm Star Wars Orthodox, so I only observe Life Day. I don't observe May the 4th, so I'll wait till November. Anyway, yeah, I read some comics this past week. Two comics that, oddly enough, were very similar reading experiences that I didn't expect. One was Santos Sisters #1. This was credited to the creators Greg and Fake. That's all the information I have about it. It was self-published by them last year, and then got republished and distributed by Floating World Comics, which is how I grabbed a copy. I saw it in previews and ordered it. And the reason I ordered this is because Jaime Hernandez, the Love and Rockets creator, said it was one of his favorite comics from last year. So that's good enough for me. So I picked it up. And imagine, if you will, a mashup between Archie and early 90s Image comics. And that's basically what you have with Santos Sisters #1.
I'm just imagining Rod Serling saying that now. Imagine.
Yeah, so that's basically what this is. The Santos sisters are Amber and Alana Santos, and there's these two teenage Latinas who find magical necklaces on the beach one day, and these magical necklaces give them magical powers, and those powers basically seem to be flight and the ability to wield giant laser rifles.
Yes. Yes.
The thing is,
I'm sold. I'm adding it to cart.
The comic itself isn't so much one story. It's a series of little 8-page gag strips like you would get in an Archie double digest. You know what I mean? And it's drawn just like an Archie comic in a similar style. There's a lot of like weird like puns and punchlines. There's like one story that's a Scooby-Doo homage. There's also another story that has Don Quixote in it for some reason, and it's very funny. But yeah, it's just these teenage girls with superpowers. They have regular stuff to deal with, like their dumb boyfriends, haunted Halloween party that they're a part of. They go camping. There's some more hijinks involving a bunch of woodland animals dressed in karate gis, like the and kind of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle style masks that they run into. It's such a weird comic, and it walks the razor thin line between being very, very clever and being very, very dumb. And I love that. Like, it's so well executed. It's definitely for adults. There's nothing like graphic or gratuitous about it, but it's very snarky and there's some suggestive stuff in it. That said, it's definitely not everyone's cup of tea, but I enjoyed the hell out of it, especially the fact that it seems very committed to being a physical thing. You know, it's not digital. It's printed on that sort of slick newsprint that Archie Digests come on. It's offset print like that stuff. As a package, as a thing, it's really, really cool and very unique. It's only $5 for 56 pages. Highly recommended if you can find it.
I'm looking at it right now. It's on, they have like a big cartel site. I'm looking at the cover and everything you were just saying. I'm just silently laughing because the subheader to this comic title is Finally a Comic for Generation X.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Oh, God.
Finally. You know, they're often overlooked. So, yeah. It's a very fun comic. I say if you find it, worth checking out. It's a very, very unique. I haven't read anything else like it this year, and very much my thing. So, oddly enough, the other comic I read that it has a very similar vibe is actually Jim Rugg's Hulk Grand Design Madness. This is the second issue of Jim Rugg's Hulk history retelling that he did for Marvel Comics. If you've read the other Grand Design stuff, there was a X-Men Grand Design that Ed Piskor did a couple years ago, and then there was a Fantastic Four Grand Design that Tom Scioli did a couple years ago as well. This might be my favorite version of the Grand Design thing, which basically takes the 60 odd years of Hulk history and condenses it down into one streamlined narrative that covers 2 issues.
Oh.
What's cool about this is that Jim Rugg, unlike Scioli and Piskor, whose work I like, they have a very like rigid style that they stick to throughout the entire thing. And Jim Rugg really plays fast and loose with his style. And he sort of mimics the style of the comics that he's mentioning. You know, this issue covers the mid 80s to about 2008, 2009, the end of the World War Hulk storyline. By the end of the book, he's drawing like a 90s Marvel comic. And throughout the book, there's like pages that are designed to look like a collage paste up of different comic panels. There's some stuff that looks like it's printed in a zine. There's some stuff that looks like it's taken out of a newspaper comic strip. There's homages and references to other creators. So visually, it's very, very striking, and I think it reads better as a narrative that way. I thought it was great. I know very little about the actual Hulk chronology and Hulk history, so I had a blast reading this stuff. I think it's one of the best again, a very unique looking comic, especially in regards to the other Grand Design stuff I've read. Yeah, so if you have any curiosity about Hulk or want to see some cool looking comics, that's highly recommended as well.
Was the first Grand Design the X-Men one, or am I now Okay. Yeah. I wasn't sure if maybe that wasn't a Grand Design, but it was something else and I had looped it in, but all right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cool idea.
I always want to read more Hulk stuff because I think Mark Ruffalo as Hulk in the movies is perfect. But every time I try to read Hulk stuff, I'm like, oh. So I feel like maybe this is something I could start with. Like, I liked Hulk Gray, but it's like everything can't be an origin story. Right. And what's great about this is that Hulk comics and Hulk storylines are really either like insane or stupid. And Jim Rugg seems to be celebrating both equally. It's really very entertaining.
him kind of like giving the shorthands, like, yeah, and then Banner and Hulk, they split apart again, and then guess what? Rick Jones died, and he came back again. Like, oh yeah, and the leader was resurrected from the dead. Like, it's constantly going back and like almost tongue in cheek making fun of how corny and dumb like Hulk comics are, but purely out of love and respect for him. So it's very, very fun, and it's great too. Again, like Jim Rugwell in this one, he like kind of mixes in the print publication history with the character history. So, you know, he'll talk about, the Hulk became a media sensation, and there's like clips from, you know, Marvel Comics themselves, or like, you know, references to the Hulk cartoon from the 60s. So it's like mixing in Hulk as a character and Hulk as a pop culture phenomenon at the same time, which I thought was really cool. Yeah, so that's good stuff. So that's what we read for this past week. Of course, there's always new comics coming out. There's always new stuff to be looking forward to. So now I'm curious, Kara, Nick, what's on the top of your pile for this upcoming week? Let's start with you, Kara.
Okay, so something that's going to disappoint me, but I'm going to try it anyways. No, that's mean of me. It's called Alice Ever After #1 by Dan Panosian and Giorgio Spalletta. And it's like, Alice goes back to Wonderland. And I'm such a sucker for stories like that, because the older I get, the more I become like an Alice in Wonderland person. Like, I love reading the stuff. I love like the aesthetic, the analyses, like all of it. But I'm very picky and definitely have like a Disney-fied version of the Alice story in my brain as my own personal headcanon of how it works. I said, like, I'll probably be disappointed by this, because I feel like so often with these, like, Alice goes back as a grown-up stories that are done by men, they're like, and then she was hot. Whereas, like, other, like, versions of Alice gets older and goes back to Wonderland that I've liked were the recent book Unbirthday, A Twisted Tale by Liz Braswell, which is, like, part of this series of Disney novels for adults where they're just like, we're going to take your favorite, add a twist, or maybe another one. It'll be an ice cream swirl, not a flat circle that Nick's mad about. And the other Alice media that I really enjoy is actually a fan fiction called Sunny Disposition that was written like 10 years ago, and I read it like every year because it's my favorite thing made about Alice in Wonderland ever. Anyway, I'm interested to take a look at this book and see if maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised and it will be fine. Also, next on my list is I finally got a copy of Heartstopper by Alice Oseman out from the library, because everyone on our Discord was like, please read this book. And I was like, okay, yes, add another queer young adult romance. I hope this phase never ends, because I hope they keep just making comics that fit into this genre forever. And then I was also thinking about, I might not do this like quite now, but I would like to start revisiting some of the comics about Thor where they were like, Thor's a lady, but which lady is it? Because I saw like the 1 second in the trailer of Natalie Portman as Thor in the new Thor movie, and I'm like all about that. I really hope she makes out with Valkyrie in that movie. And then of course
I'm gonna guess that probably doesn't happen.
God damn it, Marvel, missed opportunity.
I'm sorry. There'll be one background character who you see in the shadows, like, see, they'll say like that character happens to be LGBTQ. Like, look, there's your representation right there.
I hate it. And then of course I have been joining Paul on some of his recording journey for A Better Batmobile, the Patreon exclusive Batman series. And while reading some of the more recent stuff at the end of my tenure as a Robin on that program, I just really wanted to read more Tim Drake stuff. So now I feel like I have to dig up my copies of Red Robin from like 10 years ago and just be like, anyways, Tim Drake is the best Robin. I will not be taking questions at this time.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong there with the Tim Drake take. And again, I'll just take this opportunity to plug A Better Batmobile. Again, if you are subscribed to our Patreon, its first 2 episodes are up right now. If you're not a Patreon supporter yet, you can check it out. It's all about me and Kara and a bunch of other people talking about Grant Morrison's Batman stuff. It's very fun. So anyway, unplugged, as it were. Nick, what's on the top of your pile for this week?
I mean, it feels like every time I'm on this show, a righteous thirst for vengeance comes out, and maybe there's a pattern there that I just haven't figured out. So someone needs to, string all the pieces of yarn together between the what do you call those? The push pins, and figure that out. But that book will be great. I'm sure it will be fantastic. just like last month, whoever is writing the solicits for books at Image must have really been scared like a month or two ago that they were told they were revealing too much, because the solicit for this book is the problem with hiding is there's no place to run once you've been discovered. This is the big one. All the trains collide. So I'm really excited because I actually want some trains to collide now.
Yeah.
I know what it's like when worlds collide. Power Man 5000 explicitly spelled that out for me. But I want to know about when trains collide. So hopefully that'll happen. That book will be great. There's really nothing more to be said about that. So I'd rather take a few seconds to plug a much more unknown book coming out this week called Joyama, Joyama. This is from Dark Horse Comics. It's being written and drawn by Daniel Isles, or I'm sure that's how you say it, Daniel Isles. Daniel Isles or Daniel Islis. It's got to be Isles, right?
Got to be Isles.
So this individual's only credit is on Comics Vine is for drawing the YA novel Mr. Miracle: The Great Escape, which came out for DC Comics earlier this year. Can't speak to that. Haven't read it. Looks good though. I could go into this solicit here. Blah 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 blah. Yeah, these people. The transportation of a high-profile prisoner has been intercepted, but this was no rescue. True freedom awaits, and death is the price for one pays for failure. Who was the prisoner, and who ordered the hit? Look, just look up the art for this book, okay? Like, do you like manga-influenced aesthetics? Do you like retrofuturism? Do you like art that looks amazing? The plot of this book could be utter dog shit. The art looks unbelievable. Go look this book up. I'm so excited.
I did. It does look cool.
Well, there you go.
I just appreciate you're like, I don't even care if it's bad. I just want you to look at it.
I've posted a link for people listening. Go take a look at that. People listening live and obviously
we'll drop it in the show notes.
Just go Google it, everybody. Joyama by Daniel Isles. Isles. Very pumped.
Excellent. Just a reminder, this segment is top of your pile, not the entire pile itself. So looking at both of you, I'll write you up. I'll demerits for both of you on that, since Mike's not here.
I told you my whole pile, and that's fine. I was quick. I was fast about it.
That's true. I'm just trying to stick to the rules here. Well, before I get to my pick for the top of my pile, just a shout out to some of our Discord listeners who are here listening live with us. Paul in the Discord chat is going to be picking up Richard Stark's Parker, the Martini edition, Last Call. I really think I want to grab that too. I'm just very scared how much it's going to hurt my wallet if I try to grab that. That's a collection of all the Darwin Cook Richard Stark Parker adaptations. Danny's got Twig #1 is his pick, and then our beloved dear leader Mike Rapin is picking a Batman book, Batman Killing Time #3. He might have a fever or something. Mike, get to the doctor for picking a Batman book. That seems out of character. That said, I'll pick a Batman adjacent book. I know I picked this in our Patreon top of our pile post last week, but I didn't get a chance to read it because I just went to the shop this past weekend. So I'm once again picking Catwoman Lonely City #3. This is the third issue of the miniseries by Cliff Chiang for DC's Dark. What do they call it? Dark Label? I can't remember what they call it. Anyway.
Black Label?
It's
Black
dark
Label.
And gritty.
Dark and gritty. Well, here's the thing. It's a Cliff Chiang book, so it's not dark at all. It's actually neon and pastels all over the place. It's one of the best looking books I've read this past year. It's basically a future story set 10 years after Batman and Gordon were killed trying to save Gotham. Selena Kyle was arrested by the new mayor, and this story follows her after she's released from prison. She's going to plan her biggest score yet. It's going to be her breaking into the Batcave to find something. It's great. The first two issues were fantastic because Cliff Chiang has such an amazing eye for design, fashion, color. It's a beautiful looking book. And what's cool is if you buy it physically, it's the oversized magazine sized book comic, which is a pain if you're trying to put it in a long box to store it, but it's beautiful because you can just look at these gorgeous pages, the way they're laid out, get Catwoman running around Gotham City, all bathed in sort of neon light. It's a fantastic looking book. I think this might be the last issue. So if you've been waiting on it, if you haven't checked it out yet, maybe grab the collected edition when that drops because it's been a fantastic, fantastic Catwoman book.
I'll definitely get that when it comes out in trade. I love Catwoman.
Yeah, it's a good one. I think you'll enjoy that. So that's what we got for this coming week. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk all about music and comics. Once again, this is a commissioned topic chosen by our good friend Cinco. So we're going to talk all about that when we come back very shortly. Welcome back. As I mentioned, this episode topic was commissioned by our friend Kyle, aka Cinco, in Discord, and they wanted us to talk about comics and music. Here's actually what they prompted us for what the theme of this episode is. I'd love an episode about comics created by musicians or comics that have dedicated soundtracks. It'd also be fun to hear a little bit about what you all have been listening to recently. And he chose Nick because Nick is always in Discord dropping tracks on the music channel there over there, and then Kara and I chimed in with some ideas for this topic, so that's why he chose us. So there's a lot to cover here. I mean, I think there's a couple different things we could talk about. There's examples of comics that are about music, or comics that were created by musicians that maybe don't even have that much to do with music. And there's also the examples of comics that have a soundtrack that's dedicated. The creators sort of say, like, here's what we can listen to while you're reading the comic. It's all very interesting because comics and music seem very intertwined, but as experiences, they're radically different, right? Because comics are inherently silent. So I've always been interested in the idea of, like, how do you portray sound or convey music in a silent medium? And there's examples of it working well or not. So before we get too deep, I was maybe just open up the floor here if you have any immediate thoughts about this topic or some things that spring to mind about this. Nick, I know you've got a ton of suggestions here in the topic, in the notes.
I'm here to talk about Gem and the Holograms and Gem and the Holograms only. No.
That's fine by me.
No, like a lot of the comics that I grew up reading had a lot of music in them. So for me, comics just involved music, like the Archies, Josie and the Pussycats. Deep cut here for Archie fans, the Madhouse Glads. But like, they had like, oh, the characters are in a band, therefore we will have music, we will have the suggestion of music, we'll have them playing all these instruments. I want it noted for the record that Reggie Mantle can play way more instruments than Archie Andrews can. So
okay.
Glad we settled that time tested debate.
Well, you know what? Everyone's like, oh, Reggie's the egotistical jerk. He's the bad guy. I'm like, yeah, he's egotistical because he is way more talented than Carrot Top over there and needs to be recognized.
Yeah, and it's not egotistical to name your band after yourself, like, right? The Archies?
Right, thank you. Justice for Reggie. So that was always kind of my comic book reading experience, is just being like, oh yes, like these characters are in a band. Now they're going to go on band adventures. They're going to have lyrics. For some of the Archie stuff, like, you could listen to some songs because there was a fake group called the Archies that in 1969 had a #1 record in Sugar Sugar, which if you play it, you'll be like, oh yes, this song.
I was reading something on Wikipedia, and maybe I just merged everything together, but God, wasn't there something about the fact that the Archies sort of emerged because they initially wanted to use the Monkees, but due to, like, I think the Monkees wanted too much money, or there was some legal issues, and so they just worked around that by creating their own band. Oh,
Nick, as a huge fan of both the Monkees and the Archies, you're exactly right.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a topic we could trust me. If someone wants a commission episode where I talk about the history of the Monkees and Archies, please do that. So that was the idea. The idea was that the Monkees existed, but they're real people and they had egos. So Don Kirshner, their manager, is like, screw that. Next band I make, they're going to be all imaginary comic characters, cartoons. So that's how we have the Archies, and they made great records. So, and
then they sort of metaphysically touched upon that in the Josie and the Pussycats movie, where we got to peek under the lid of the late 90s, early 2000s pop machine, where the pop groups are literally interchangeable manufactured entities, and once they start developing egos, that's when they get murdered.
Yes. Again, topic for another episode. Actually, we already did an episode for the movie club all
we
about
already did that. I'm just saying it's relevant.
So, yeah, it is relevant. Well, speaking of the Archies, because I'm always down to talk about the Archies, I really enjoy, a few years ago, they did a series of one-shots or mini-series where the Archies would meet other real musicians. And those was really super fun.
The Ramones.
Archie meets Kiss. Obviously, Archie meets the Ramones was very important to me. I love that comic. Tegan and Sarah showed up in the Archie series from a couple years ago. And that, like, the blending of that stuff is always really cool because it's like, again, comics and music have a lot of influence in terms of style. They influence each other very deeply. Again, even though as artistic experiences, they couldn't be more different in a lot of ways. But yeah, I always thought that was cool, the way the Archies would meet up with those. I mean, Archie and the gang, they travel back to CBGB's in the 70s and see the Ramones play. Like, that's the coolest thing imaginable. So very fun stuff.
All things are possible in Archie comics.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then there's so many contemporary comics where a band is the focal point. Like, just off the top of my head, brief Black Canary series over at DC where they were just like, Black Canary's superpower is her canary cry, which is like a sonic cry, but what if she's a singer? What a great cover story. And I'm like, that is a great cover story. Why did we make her a florist when you could have made her a rock star? Like, of course.
Yeah. And again, that's a great example of a book that really captures the sort of feeling of a musician playing live. Like, all the scenes of the Black Canary band playing are very dynamic and they're very action. And it's like, you can see the music and you can see the sound on top of just like the pose of them playing. Because drawing people playing instruments can sometimes look very stiff. And I think that book in particular was a great example of how to portray, what the sound is that's coming off the page. You can almost hear it when you're looking at the page. I think Gem and the Holograms is another good example of that same thing. When you look at the page, you know exactly what that's supposed to sound like, what they're playing on the panel.
I'm so sad that there's not like an actual recording of the Gem and the Holograms comic album.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
exactly. Nick, did you have any maybe examples of stuff like this? You want to chime in?
Well, I mean, I think what's interesting about specifically, especially the Gem and the Holograms example, and then also to some extent like the Archies example, and definitely the Black Canary, is that you've actually got this extra layer of making things more difficult, which is that you're dealing with music that isn't real, right? Because I was to bring in one of the books that I read for this episode, I read The Fifth Beatle, right?
Yes.
There's actually, which makes sense because the book's really not as much about the Beatles as it is about my goodness, Brian
Epstein.
Geez.
Epstein.
Yeah, exactly. Is that with that book, it's so easy to evoke the music, right? Because you can just put some of the lyrics up and pretty much, I mean, this is the most ubiquitous pop band of the last 50 or 60 years, right? So everybody basically can just bring up the soundtrack in their mind, I suppose. And so there's less pressure to sort of convincingly portray the music, because you can even just put up the lyrics, and that's not a knock against the art or how it tried to evoke things. I think when we talk about how does the Fifth Beatle present music, I think the shorthand easy answer is that it doesn't really present that much music, because that's actually not what it's about. The music and the Beatles themselves are more in the background. Of course, what it does do is you can just put up the lyrics and you're basically set with the Beatles, right? Not everything else has that luxury. But I did find that sort of interesting, is that you can look at some books where music is involved and you can literally just put words and the music plays in their brain, and other books have to find other ways to do that, like the ones that you two just literally brought up. So
yeah, I mean, The Fifth Beatle is a gorgeous book.
Yeah,
and
just visually,
you're right. Yeah. Like it didn't. You don't need to add anything to the Beatles lyrics because, as you mentioned, they are so ubiquitous. Even if you don't know like the exact song, you still have kind of like an idea of that soundscape and that
right.
That
some
genre.
Other Beatles song will probably play, in your brain or something like that. So
I actually think, and this is kind of a stretch, but I have reasons that The Wicked and the Divine falls into that same kind of category, because The Wicked and the Divine is about these basically like pop stars that are also gods. And you kind of see glimpses of the start of a performance or like a piece of a musical performance in these different genres that they're representing. But the story isn't really about the performances and the groups, and it's more about like the quote unquote background characters who really become main characters, and the politics of the behind the scenes of what it's like to be famous or adored or hated, and all of those things that come along with being a popular music act. So that felt more like behind the scenes than something like Gem and the Holograms, which was more like behind the scenes plus performance.
And very quick, I mean, Wicked and Divine is also an example of a comic that sort of had a soundtrack you could listen to. I remember when that book launched, the writer Kieran Gillen had a ongoing Spotify playlist that they were putting together. They were always dropping stuff in while they were writing the book. So you'd actually listen to the actual music that was influencing the writing and kind of lined up with what was happening in the book as you would listen through it. So that's something I think is more and more common these days. The idea of creators saying like, here's what I listened to when I wrote this. And yeah, it's right there. Very quickly, while we're talking about the Beatles, I wanted to mention another comic about the Beatles called Babies in Black by Arne Belstorff. This came out 2012, I think. And it's actually, again, not about the Beatles specifically. It's about their original bass player, Stu Sutcliffe, and his girlfriend, Astrid Kirchner. Unlike, again, like you're saying, it's a book that it's about the Beatles, so you don't really need to say much more because everyone kind of knows the whole story. But this focuses on the Beatles in Hamburg, Germany in 1960. And the illustration style is very simple. A lot of it's like charcoal sort of illustration, lots of dark panels, but it really captures the sort of smoky, small clubs that they were playing in at the time. And it captures the sort of, transfer from beatnik culture to 60s culture that they were trapped in. So in terms of capturing a moment in time and a sound that you maybe not think about when you think about the Beatles as a pop phenomenon, it's a really, really cool book. And it's kind of a deep dive into a very specific moment in their history. I really, really enjoyed it.
Where do we think Scott Pilgrim fits into all of this?
I
have to ask because I feel like that's a book that at some point in the last 20 years, everybody who reads comics read that book. And there is music as part of that book in a way that feels more like common now, I guess, like more like you would see it.
What's difficult with that, though, is because at this point, if you read the book, chances are you've seen the movie. So all those songs that you kind of had to imagine what they sound like the first time you read it, you now have the actual song to like compare it to. You know
excellent point. That's true.
So it's a very different experience if you go back and reread it.
What if you haven't seen the movie and don't plan on it?
Well, there you go. Yeah.
What if you're just stubborn, Paul?
Yeah. No, I wouldn't fault you for not seeing the movie as much as I did enjoy it. But I will say in that regard, when I did see the movie, the songs, they pretty much sounded exactly like I expected them to do having read the book. You know what I mean? They did a really good job of saying, here's the vibe that this page is giving off. We're going to put that into sound. And they did a really good job translating the music of the comic into actual music for the film. So if nothing else, just listen to the soundtrack. Yeah.
If you look at Edgar Wright movies, he definitely seems to care more and have more of an ear for the musical element of his movies than certain other directors do. So
was that Edgar Wright?
Yeah,
it was. Yeah.
And, I mean, you sort of see that ear for attention as well in Baby Driver, even though obviously what's his face was in that, and that kind of ruined that now. But we don't need to talk about
not the soundtrack, Nick.
Kevin Spacey. Yeah,
that's right.
The soundtrack is fine.
Yeah, yeah.
So I want to very briefly maybe talk about some comics that were actually written by musicians, because I think that's a good example of someone who understands both media in a way and kind of like can blur that line and kind of bridge that. One example I'm thinking of off the top of my head is Mike Allred, who actually we know is a comic book artist, but he actually was in a band called Red Rocket 7 that did a couple records. I don't know that I've ever actually heard them, but Mike Allred did a comic in the 90s called Red Rocket 7, which is sort of about this alien that comes to Earth and witnesses the history of rock and roll. I don't know if that's still in print. We can find copies of it pretty easily. It's a pretty fun comic. He also did a David Bowie graphic novel biography called Bowie, Stardust, Ray Guns, and Moon Age Daydreams. That's Mike and Laura Allred, of course, with Steve Horton helping them with that one. I like that book a lot because it was a great example of someone who loved the source material so much. They put a ton of little details, Easter eggs, and clues into the page where it's like, there's pages where it's basically an illustration of the lyrics of a song. So you have the song Life on Mars by David Bowie, and it's like, there's a page and it's like all the sort of things that are talked about in the lyrics are drawn on the page. And you kind of have to play like, Where's Waldo to kind of find all the references. And then again, Mike Allred capturing the sort of fashion of the mid 70s of David Bowie and the Spiders from Mars or Ziggy Stardust. Like, it's a really, really beautiful looking book. And I think it's because Allred has a background in music as well that he's able to do those illustrations and designs like that.
Okay, so everyone's about to get mad at me, but I'm so sorry. But in my head, I mixed up Gerard Way and Jared Leto.
Oh no.
I'm so sorry, but I was like, they both were in bands where the aesthetic was black and red, right?
Yeah.
So I was just Googling like Jared Leto comic books and I'm just getting Morbius sucked reviews. So I'm just I was very confused because I was like, Gerard, that guy did a comic book, right? What was that comic book? I'm so sorry, everybody.
Yeah.
This is like, I love comic books that portray music, but I don't actually really pay attention to music. So that's how I make confusion happens like that. It just does.
It sometimes happens. Yeah. Well, thankfully, we don't have to talk about one of those two gentlemen. We can talk about Gerard Way and talk about his Doom Patrol, which is a great comic. And again, feels very influenced by music. Worth mentioning again that the...
why? Like, how does it feel influenced by music to you? Like, are there musical elements? Is it just like a vibe you're getting?
Yeah, there's a vibe. There's a rhythm to kind of the way the story lays out. There's a sense of, I don't know, there's a design sense that feels very taken from like pop culture, music culture, rock and roll. I feel is in that book.
Am I imagining that? Is this the book that has a character named the Drummer, right? Isn't that part of it too?
Not in Doom Patrol that I know of, no.
Am I now maybe confusing the old and the new Doom Patrol? Maybe.
Perhaps.
I thought that book was great. Honestly, I think that book is a million times better than Umbrella Academy, and I'm sure some people will not appreciate that, but that's okay. I'm just Obviously, Gerard Way was doing comics before My Chemical Romance got big, but there's no denying that. I think after My Chemical Romance, he basically could do whatever he wanted with comics. So you've got that. I know Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine has written comics. The pop artist Lights actually drew her own graphic novel, Skin and Earth, which also accompanied her album with the exact same name. So you can actually, there's a part at the beginning of the graphic novel where you can sort of sync the 12 different chapters of the book with the 12 songs on the album, which I think is really cool.
Gotcha.
Cinco pointed out Max Bemis from Say Anything. Another great example. Bemis, of course, is interesting because I think most of Bemis's work actually hasn't involved music at all. There's always been somewhat of like a punk rock feeling to Bemis's work. I think that he brings that to most of his comics, which I think is great. But
guys, I just remembered a comic book about music that I know I've talked about on the show before, but it's super relevant right now.
Okay.
When I was in middle school, I voraciously devoured all 3 issues of a manga called Princess Ai that Courtney Love was like a co-creator on. It was about this, maybe she's an angel, maybe she's an alien, she's fallen to Earth and she's got little wings and they're growing and she has the most beautiful voice and she can sing in all the finest gentlemen's clubs in Tokyo and fall in love with the cute musician boy who hangs out by the local library. And I loved it because it was very aesthetic. Like, it was really doubling down on kind of like a gothy interpretation of the Harajuku aesthetic that was coming out of Japan at the time, where everything was very like strappy and cosplay-y and ruffly and your hair is in an elaborate contraption and you're just like getting dressed up to go get photographed on the weekends kind of thing. And this is like the aesthetic of this manga. And because a big component of it was like, this character has the most beautiful voice and everyone loves it when she sings. So there were a lot of like lyrics in this book, and I was so annoyed that they weren't actual songs that I could listen to, because I was like, this book is so cool, this character is so cool, these lyrics are so awesome and edgy, and they like printed the lyrics up in the manga, but there wasn't like an equivalent. And I thought, oh well, I didn't know anything about Courtney Love, but I'm like, I'm vaguely aware that Courtney Love is a musical artist, like maybe these are some of her songs, and they weren't. And what's extra interesting about this manga is, again, I didn't know anything about Courtney Love or Kurt Cobain at the time that I was reading it, but I like just listened to a podcast about the both of them. And now thinking back on the plot of that book, I'm like, oh my God, it's like a fantasy retelling of Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love's relationship, except she's the protagonist this time. Well done. Very nice.
I thought you were going to tell me that like years after the events, and now you're reading this book, it like you suddenly find out that this book actually reveals what really happened to Kurt Cobain.
Right. Yeah.
No. No. So, like, is it the best manga in the world? No, but it has a special place in my heart. It is very much about music, and it is sort of a fantasy retelling of a musical drama that actually happened.
Yeah, because I mean, there's another subgenre of comics that are music biographies, and that's very much my sweet spot. There's a lot of stuff books like that. One that really came to mind specifically for this topic is called Chasing the Bird. It's Charlie Parker in California by the cartoonist David Chisholm. What's interesting is that Dave Chisholm, in addition to being a comic book artist, is also a jazz musician himself. So he did this book about the jazz musician Charlie Parker, and I'm dumb. I don't know anything about jazz. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't get it. But this comic is really beautiful because it tells you all you need to know. It tells like why Charlie Parker is important. The book is a series of vignettes of people that met Charlie Parker when he spent time in California. But the end of the book, the last few pages, is like Charlie Parker, the saxophone jazz musician, saxophonist, playing a sax solo on stage. And the way it's drawn, you can kind of just like hear it just by looking at the position he's standing in, the way it's illustrated. It's like, oh, you don't even really have to even listen to the song he's playing, they're making reference to. You can kind of just intuit what it's doing and how it sounds to the crowd. And while reading this book, I did try to listen to some Charlie Parker stuff. Again, I'm a dum-dum when it comes to jazz, but the way that Chisholm was able to kind of bridge that gap and illustrate the way the music sounds on the page was really, really striking. It's one of the best examples of that gap and how to make that work that I've ever read.
I sort of had the exact same experience with the original graphic novel Blue and Green. I don't know if you've read that, which is also about a jazz saxophonist.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
Yeah. Written by Ram V and drawn by Anand RK. I think that's...
I guess jazz saxophone is the hot subgenre of musical comics now.
Yeah.
I mean, what was interesting about that is the colorist John Pearson, like the way Pearson sort of kind of like used these background hues in different scenes. I mean, it sort of has to, I don't know, it felt almost a little like synesthesia, right? Where you see colors or you hear colors, right? Sort of seeing certain colors kind of evoked a certain tone to the music.
Yeah. That's a really beautiful book. I mean, just in terms of illustration, I mean, just the way it looks, the way they use the color, like you said, it's a gorgeous looking comic book.
There's the way that book like portrays music by using color to evoke tones, I thought was really, really great. Because it's, especially again, as you said, like with jazz, like you largely don't have lyrics. So
right.
If someone says, "Oh, I'm playing John Coltrane," it's like, "Well, that's great. I don't know what that song is." Not all of us were forced to watch, Ken Burns' 78-part series on jazz. So,
right.
Not everyone had my father as a parent and watched every Ken Burns thing except for quote, "I'm not watching that baseball shit," unquote. Sorry, Paul.
No, it's all right.
But that's where my dad drew the line. So.
Not embracing the great American pastime, just
I know.
the music.
Yeah, he was very up for the Civil War one, and he will watch that a million times over, where America, gets, fractured, but America's pastime, he's not interested. So
Sure.
if someone wants to commission an app on my dad, just let me know. We'll do it, because I'm sure we can talk all about him shouting at me when he doesn't have his hearing aids in. So it'll be good.
Oh my God, Nick. So thinking about the kind of color tones versus the musical tones, no, it was making me think about the books that we listed earlier, where there are lyrics and they are about these fictional bands, and we don't know what the music sounds like. But the color palette is perhaps one of the most important parts of that. Like when you think of Gem and the Holograms and all those like pastel and candy colors versus like Black Canary and everything's like black, shades of gray, some reds. Like you do through the color get a sense of what kind of music they're maybe going for with that.
Right. Because like emo kind of has a color palette, and grunge sort of has a color palette. It looks like a plaid flannel. And obviously with 80s synth pop, you've got the neon hue. So no, that's a great point. Like color as a shorthand for music and even musical eras or musical genres, like it exists. It totally exists.
So if you are thinking about creating a musically based comic book, put most of your money into your colorist.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
I was going to say, that made me think of another example of a book that has lyrics, and I wasn't sure how to read the lyrics as a musical, but luckily the creators actually went ahead and recorded the music of the comic that was being illustrated and put it up online. Unfortunately, it's a black and white comic, so it kind of defeats the point you just made about color. But back, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, the Judge Dredd magazine had like a big 30th anniversary issue, and one of the comic strips in there is called Lawless. It's Judge Dredd adjacent. It's about, these former judges on an alien planet that's kind of like a Western kind of story vibe to it. Anyway, Dan Abnett and Phil Westslade were the creators on that, and they did a musical issue for the Judge Dredd magazine anniversary, Lawless the musical. I remember reading that. I know very little about musicals as a genre, so I wasn't sure how I was supposed to be reading this and what I was supposed to be hearing in my head. But they went ahead and actually recorded the Lawless musical. You can actually find it on the 2000 AD website. It's very, very fun if you want to sing along with the comic. Yeah, I'll drop a link to that in the show notes. It's very fun.
That's commitment to an idea right there.
I think they even said we weren't planning on doing this, but we were all stuck inside for a year thanks to the pandemic. So here you go. We actually went ahead and recorded it. So.
Other people made sourdough bread, and we wrote a musical.
Yeah, it's very fun.
That's deranged. Oh my! Like part of me is like, God, I hope it's like 4 songs, but like part of me is like, oh my God, what if this is like a 2-hour thing they did?
It's good stuff. Yeah.
I mean, not quite to that level, but do you remember like a million years ago now when the like Spider-Gwen comics were coming out and like a fan group recorded the song that like the Mary Janes were singing?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was like an almost great moment because I was just like, come on, Marvel, you're so close. You're so close. Just bring them into the fold, make them write more songs for you.
I'm sure they got an email that said, unfortunately, we cannot accept ideas from... we can't accept pitch ideas from fans. Please don't send us another.
Right. Yeah.
Oh my God.
We got a no prize, and that was about it.
Such a missed opportunity. I mean, Archie sanctioned the Veronicas, more or less. So it can be done. There is precedent.
Yeah.
So close, Marvel.
Which I think this kind of leads into maybe another branch of this conversation. Briefly, we could talk about comics that actually have dedicated soundtracks. We touched on it briefly, but again, I think that something is happening more and more regularly. One example of that is That Texas Blood, the Image series. If you read that comic in the letters page at the back of each comic, there's a QR code you can scan that'll take you to your Spotify account, and there's a playlist of songs that the creators were listening to and influenced that particular issue or that story arc. I've never listened to it because I don't use Spotify, but it's a really cool idea to give fans something like, here's an insight not only to the creative process, but it might enhance the reading experience as well. Nick, I know you read that series. Have you listened to the soundtracks at all?
I guess I didn't. Did I totally miss out on, like, this is news to me. Like, you're telling me this
really?
for the first time. I don't know if maybe, I can't imagine that they would have removed this out of the single issues, but
No.
maybe they
I don't know.
did. I mean,
Paul,
removed it out of the trade. Sorry.
Okay, yeah.
Paul, I'm younger than you, but I felt like such an old person when you said you scan this QR code, because I just feel like QR codes as a concept exhaust me.
Well, I mean, honestly, for me, like, I need, when people are like, oh, just listen to this soundtrack while you do this, like, read this book, like, I need that process streamlined as much as possible. Like, if I need to go download a playlist and then log in, no. Like, I actually really appreciate when some of these groups or whatever, like the what was the book I was looking at, the graphic novel about the Carter family, Don't Forget the Song, like, it just literally came with the CD, like that. I know no one owns a CD player anymore. Everyone, you can just Wikipedia the entry on that, you'll figure out what it is. But like, for me, that is the level of ease that I need to do this sort of shit. Just give me a CD.
Wait, that reminds me. No, guys, I had a very weird dream last night, and in it there was like
the Carter family.
No, okay. But it does involve CDs. It was like, when your dream, I don't know if you guys do this, but if you have like dreams where your brain kind of like mashes people in your life together into like an amalgamated character, and you know who they are, but like they're shifting based on the scene. Okay,
yeah, I just
maybe
do that
my
with
brain
real
does
people.
that. Maybe my brain does that. Anyway, so in my dream, the Renee Nick hybrid was showing me a backpack they had made. And this backpack had, in like the backpacks from like 20 years ago, there would be like a compartment on the top where you could put your Discman and maybe some CDs. All right. So that, but there was like, here's the section for your floppy disks, and here's the sections for your USB cards, and here's the section for your CDs. It was like all these different like weird formats of media we've had. And as I was being shown the backpack, I realized the backpack was growing bigger and bigger until it was like bigger than me and I couldn't possibly carry it. Anyways, so
paging Dr. Freud. I'm sure that means nothing. Yeah, I'm sure there's nothing. Yeah.
Too many media formats to pay attention to, guys.
So Nick, if you need it streamlined, clearly you're picking up the issues of What's the Furthest Place from Here, the Image series that come bundled with a 7-inch 45 record of the songs that are being influenced in comic, right?
Oh my god, I forgot about that too. That's
as much as
wild.
I love comics and vinyl, I've not picked those up. I just can't bring myself to do it.
God. Well, I mean, maybe if I liked the book more, maybe that would be a more viable thing for me, but yeah. I love Tyler Boss. I love his art. I think it's a great looking book. It feels like it's going nowhere.
Well, again, the first issue of that was so great because all these, like, it's a post-apocalyptic world. All these teenagers are basically living in a record store, and part of their sort of ritual practice that they do is each person gets to select an album as their totem. I'm like, oh my god, that's speaking so much to my experience, not just as a teenager.
I totally forgot
life.
how musically oriented that book was. No, you're completely right. That's right. You have to keep your record safe. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That idea of like, as a teenager, you identify with one record so strongly. It's like, yes, I think everyone had that experience no matter what age you are. Music is so important at that age where it's just like, yes, this record is speaking to me on a level and it's so important. It becomes my identity. That's a really powerful idea. I wish the book had kind of stuck with that instead of, whatever it is now. So
whatever it is. Yeah, exactly.
Quick, what's that album for you? For me, it's Michelle Branch's Hotel Paper.
Oh God.
I mean, as a teenager,
pick one. I have more, but that's the one that like burns bright in my mind because that was like fall vibes all the way. Back to school, gotta walk to the pond by myself in the rain.
Oh gosh.
I had the collection of the Ramones greatest hits, Ramones Mania. I had that on cassette tape, and I wore the tape out listening to it to school every day, back and forth. So that's for me.
Pick one, Nick.
I mean, I think I probably listened to So Long Astoria by the Ataris like so many times on my paper route that I think the CD stopped working. So
Oh.
it's probably that. Me, like, early aughts emo Nick, for sure. Slash, pop punk. So, yeah, definitely
Sure.
that. So, that's a great question.
Yeah. That being said, I think maybe we can go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I think that's a nice organic pivot to discuss some of the things that we've been listening to, as I think there was a request to perhaps briefly discuss several of the things that we are listening to.
Can I start? Because my list will be the shortest.
Sure.
Thank you.
I feel like you guys are way more musically inclined than I am. And mine is relevant to my weird dream that I had where Nick and Renee were the same person.
We're slowly becoming, I mean, the more I read manga, the convergence is happening. So
no, because I was thinking about what music am I listening to? Because usually I just like pick like one album and just do that on loop until I have a different album.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, but
sometimes it's just even a song. Like, I'll admit, like, maybe this is bad. Do other people do this? Like, I will literally put a single song on repeat.
I will loop a song for for a brief moment. That was me and the Kesha track "Summer," which is obsession worthy. During the pandemic, I was definitely looping the Birds of Prey soundtrack and the Charlie's Angels soundtrack. Recently, I have been, and by recently I mean just like the last 2 weeks. Okay. I went back to Taylor Swift's Folklore because I made my brother listen to it, and he was like, "It's fine," and I was like, "It's fine. It's the pop cultural keystone of the early pandemic in the United States."
Anyway, I'm listening to that album now. Not talking to my brother. No.
Oh my god. So, but like the other stuff that I've been listening to, because I always have gravitated more towards like film soundtracks, because I feel like I get different songs from different artists that are still part of a cohesive whole. Have been listening to like early 2000s teen comedy soundtracks. Like right now I am doing the Bring It On soundtrack pretty hard, and I'm like, am I 20 years too late for the Sum 41 party? And then I was just thinking, I'll just have Nick and Renee make me a playlist of stuff that I missed 20 years ago that's like particular subgenre of music.
There won't be a lot of Sum 41 on that playlist for me, but yeah, that's fine.
No, but like it's just kind of like the music that you listen to and you're like, ah, yes, a teen movie in the early 2000s. Like none of this music was ever like a top 40 hit, but you listen to it and all of a sudden you're in the middle of 10 Things I Hate About You.
Like freaking Wheatus's Teenage Dirtbag or whatever. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
See, like I don't even know that. That's why I was just like, who do I know who can tell me what to listen to that's kind of like this? But yeah, that's my super short list right now. That's nice. My music right now. I'm just in denial about the present and the future.
Sure. Me too. I'm listening to old stuff as well. So yeah. Very briefly, the few things that have been on my turntable recently, because that's what I listen to when I'm at home on my record player. Record Store Day was last week. I spent way too much money on records. The big thing I bought was a big box set of all of the 80s Ramones albums. That's the albums Pleasant Dreams through Brain Drain, stuff I didn't have on vinyl. So I bought that box set. I've been having fun going back down memory lane, listening to all that Ramones stuff. I also picked up a couple Cheap Trick records from the 70s I didn't have. That's In Color and Heaven Tonight. Those have been on my turntable pretty frequently lately. In terms of newer stuff, I've been enjoying another Record Store Day selection was Tegan and Sarah's Still Jealous, which is basically them re-recording their 2004 album So Jealous, but they cover each other's songs. It's very cute. It's very, very nice.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And then it's in terms of new music that actually was written and came out within the past few years. Destroyer's new album, Labyrinthitis, is so good. Destroyer, of course, is the main band of Dan Behar, who's a member of the New Pornographers. So if you know, familiar with that group. And this is one of his weirdest records. It's a mix of like electronic synthy pop stuff, some like post-punk art rock. He's always been able to kind of shape shift between genres, and this feels like it's everything he's kind of done at the same time. It's a very cool record. And then I'm really enjoying the new Superchunk album, Wild Loneliness. That's kind of been my go-to as well. So that's some newer stuff I've been digging. What about you, Nick? What are you listening to?
Like for like my pop punk emo revival sort of shit, which I love. Song wise, like Go to Hell by Between You and Me featuring yours truly and The Best Part of Letting Go by The Dangerous Summer are definitely the big ones for me. Album-wise, in the same genre sort of thing, Fever by Against the Current would be another one. In terms of music that I like to work to, because honestly, sort of a different list, but I think people are, I'm always looking for good soundtracks, video game soundtracks, or anything to work to.
The Finding Nemo soundtrack.
Yeah.
That was my most listened to on Spotify last year because I just had that on loop all the time.
The Tron, I always get them confused. Is Tron Evolution the video game or the movie? Is Evolution the movie?
I don't remember.
Is it Tron under?
Yeah.
I can't. The Tron movie from 2012 or whatever, folks. That soundtrack is great to work to. Kavinsky, some of you might know Kavinsky. He did the song at the beginning of the movie Drive, Night Call.
Yep.
Kavinsky put out a new album, first new album in 9 years, called Reborn. That is a great one to work to. If you're doing anything on the computer, and you put that on, you suddenly feel like you're the most important, I am hacking the mainframe right now. And it's just you in a Microsoft PowerPoint document, picking out clip art, and you're like, I am such a badass.
Sure.
And in the same vein, another great one to work to, all of the music for Minecraft. I don't play the game at all. I can't tell you if you put 2 coppers and 3 iron ores and it makes a easy bake oven or whatever. I can't tell you how any of that shit works. But the Minecraft soundtracks are so good to work to. And there's a new one called Caves and Cliffs by Lena Rain and Kumi Tanioka. And oh God, so good to work to that. If you need, if anybody else wants great music to sit in front of a computer and move Excel spreadsheets around, hit me up, because I got all sorts of recommendations.
That's funny, because I remember whenever I'm kind of doing stuff like that, I always like to listen to John Carpenter. The one soundtrack I always listen to is the Escape from New York soundtrack, which I think might have a very similar vibe. It's very sort of droney, synth heavy kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, yeah. You gotta have a good, working or doing important things soundtrack list, and video game soundtracks, or the Interstellar soundtrack, or I have so many recommendations. Maybe we'll have to make another episode about that.
Perhaps we'll have to put together a playlist at some point.
But it can't be on Spotify.
They can't be on Spotify. They can't have. There's no QR codes involved.
You have to label it music to make capitalism tolerable by.
And it's only going to be released on, what were those called? Micro CDs. It's only going to be released on micro CD.
Mini discs.
No, we're not going vinyl, Brian. We're really. We're going straight to micro CDs. Remember that? I remember the one kid in middle school who had a micro CD player, and he's like, I know, don't be jealous. I know you're staring at the future. I'm like, all right, fuck you. 2 years later, no one ever sees one ever again.
Until then, I want to say this has been a fun conversation. I don't think we have any final thoughts. We're running long. I know Mike's going to be so angry when he sees how long this episode ran. Obviously,
Mike's not here. He can deal.
No, it's been a very fun conversation.
Point out for the record that was Kara who said that. Forever, whoever is maybe listening and wondering, well, who said that was Kara. That wasn't. And don't confuse that for anyone else. That was Kara.
Who gets an attitude when the host is away? It's me.
Yeah. This is a very fun conversation. I feel like we just scratched the surface. We can always come back and talk about music again. I think obviously we have a lot to say and a lot of opinions. So again, thank you.
Just record scratch the surface.
Ugh. Don't scratch up your records that way. That's not fun. And won't be a sophomore slump when we do it again. Thank you, Cinco, for commissioning this episode. That you can do that as a Patreon member. We really appreciate it. It was a fun topic. I feel like, again, there's a lot more to unpack. So maybe we might return to it at some point. So next week, Mike and Brian will be joined by special guests Brenda and Austin of the Secret Histories of Nerd Mysteries podcast to chat about comics, manga, and the lore of the nerd world. That'll be fun. And until then, you can follow us all on Twitter. Nick is over on Twitter at Death Star Plans. Kara is at Kara S. Zam. I'm over there at Oh Hi Polly, and the show is at IRCB Podcast. That's the same handle for Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and anything else. I don't know. We still is. I think that's all I know. So we're over there. Renee's doing good stuff on TikTok. So check that out if you haven't subscribed or followed us over there yet.
We'll have a QR code somewhere in there.
Oh, no. This episode first aired on Patreon and is possible because of our wonderful patrons. Join today for exclusive series like IRCB Movie Club, Saga of Saga, and more. You can join now at patreon.com/IRCB podcast.
If you haven't already, please rate and review our show 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, yes, they have ratings, or wherever you listen to your podcast, because we deserve it.
We would also love to have you join the IRCB Discord community to chat comics and more. Plus, you can listen to our episodes live as we record every week. Check the link to our Discord in the show notes.
Podcasts grow best when spread by word of mouth, so why not tell your friends, family, and local comic shop about IRCB?
Speaking of music, Infinity Shred is the best band in the known universe, and they do all of the music for our shows. Zander is a very cool guy who edits the show and makes us sound so smart and cool. Thank you again to Cinco for commissioning this episode. Thank you, Nick and Kara, for joining me on this musical journey. Thank you, Mike, for letting me sit in the host chair. Thanks for keeping it warm for me. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you.